On Cybertron, Soundwave fought alongside the other Decepticons for 200 years, felling many Autobots such as Beachcomber. He would later take part in the Decepticon raiding party on board the Nemesis as it pursued the Ark and took part in the raiding party that boarded the Autobot vessel. Many years later, Soundwave was one of many Decepticons lying dormant in the Ark when Jetfire unearthed the ship and attempted to use Teletron 1 to rebuild the Transformers aboard. A fight broke out, and Starscream ordered Skywarp to drag Decepticon warriors closer to his position to take advantage of the computer's indiscriminate repairs. Soundwave, along with the cassettes inside his chest compartment, was the first rebuilt and immediately opened fire on Optimus Prime. He then deployed Ravage to assist Starscream's attack on Optimus, and was visibly shaken when Optimus shot Ravage. After the Autobots escaped, Soundwave explained to Starscream and Skywarp, all while cradling a damaged Ravage, that Teletron 1 had been damaged beyond their current capacity of repair due to their lack of energy. He explained he had already sent Laserbeak in search of an energy source and argued that Starscream should collect it due to his higher energon reserves. Soundwave attempted to say the plan is what he would want, but was promptly told by Starscream to never say his name. Starscream brought back enough energy to power the other Decepticons, and they all returned to collect the rest, with Soundwave carrying a converter taken from the Autobots' ship. Soundwave deployed Rumble to assist in setting up the energy transfer module before powering on the converter, claiming to Starscream it would provide them limitless power. Soundwave would then warn Skywarp of a jet falling out of the sky, courtesy of Starscream. They did make it back to the Ark with energy and materials. However, Soundwave, still cradling Ravage, explained to Starscream that while they had more than enough energon to repair Teletron 1, the materials available lacked the advanced compound structure. He attempted to lament on what Megatron would have done, which earned him a swift slap from Starscream for mentioning that name. Just then, the Decepticons received a priority alert from Laserbeak about an Autobot. Soundwave and his cassettes attacked Optimus Prime and Cliffjumper at the local hospital, catching the two off guard. Soundwave quickly dispatched Optimus with a kick to the face, and was about to execute the Autobot leader before Starscream told him to wait. Starscream had figured out the purpose of the hospital and wanted to make Optimus suffer before Soundwave killed him. However, Soundwave alerted Starscream to two approaching Autobots, Ratchet and Jazz. Soundwave and Starscream fired on the newcomers, but Jazz quickly dispatched them, slamming Soundwave into the ground. The Autobots rallied, so Starscream called for a retreat, carrying Soundwave in cassette player mode on the underside of his jet mode. The Decepticons returned to the Ark, Soundwave carrying the damaged Skywarp and berating Starscream's single-minded appetite for destruction. As the two argued over repairs, Soundwave realized they did have the Cybertronian materials needed, and so he and Starscream tore Skywarp apart to get them. After the repairs were completed, Soundwave watched as Teletron 1 finally began repairing Decepticons. Soundwave wanted to use the computer to rebuild Ravage, but Starscream vetoed the idea and punted the cassette aside, instead opting to revive Thundercracker. Soundwave then received word from Laserbeak that the Autobots had found a fresh source of energy, prompting Starscream to lead an expeditionary force to put a stop to them. Later, when the Autobots mounted a counteroffensive to retake the Ark, Soundwave was part of the counterattack as the Autobots managed to slip past Devastator into the ship. A furious Devastator began to pound his way into the ship to get at the Autobots, prompting Soundwave to try and get the Combiner to stop, pointing out that the Decepticons needed the Ark too, and that a better way would be to dig through a relatively weak part of the mountain the ship was embedded in. The operation was successful, and Soundwave made it through to grapple with Jazz. However, Devastator would be defeated by Optimus Prime wounding Starscream in the process, and the Decepticons retreated. Before Soundwave left carrying Ravage, Optimus stopped to offer Soundwave an olive branch. Soundwave wordlessly glanced toward Ravage, and then threw a punch at Optimus. However, the Prime caught his punch, and Soundwave hitched a ride from Thundercracker away from the Arkansas. As the Decepticons took refuge in a mountainous area, Soundwave called a meeting of the Decepticons, calling for Starscream's resignation as acting Decepticon leader, invoking the right of a battle for the leadership when he refused. Starscream could only beg and plead as Soundwave beat him senseless. When Starscream tried to fight back with some cheap tricks, Soundwave dispatched Laserbeak, who ripped out his eye. Starscream once again tried bargaining, but Soundwave, still not having forgiven the Seeker for kicking Ravage, disemboweled Starscream and threw him off a cliff. Soundwave then vowed to use Starscream's parts to rebuild Ravage, and that he would rebuild the Decepticons as a whole and make them conquerors again, and the other Decepticons knelt and cheered for their new leader. A more methodical leader than Starscream, Soundwave's first act as leader was to set up a new base of operations for the Decepticons. He did this by attacking the human aircraft carrier Henry Harrison alongside Thundercracker. Thundercracker wanted to take pity on the humans and let them abandon ship, but Soundwave pointed out that they couldn't allow for any witnesses to the attack and sank their lifeboats. Moving on to the next phase of the plan, the two Decepticons scuttled the carrier so that it lay next to where the Constructicons were unearthing the Nemesis. Using the Harrison's nuclear reactor, the Decepticons restored power to their sunken starship and made their way inside it. It was then that they realized that Astrotrain was online, and Soundwave ordered a reluctant Thundercracker to open his cell. Astrotrain proceeded to beat Thundercracker senseless, demanding to know where Megatron was. Soundwave responded that he didn't know, and agreed to Astrotrain's terms that when they found Megatron, they would turn him over to Astrotrain's tender mercies. Soundwave then moved on to Phase 3 of his plan, as while the large and energon-deprived Nemesis was immobile and unspaceworthy, he only needed the ship's communication systems to contact Cybertron, allowing him to reach Shockwave. Thanking Shockwave for agreeing to come to their aid, Soundwave led the Decepticons in the ensuing battle with the Autobots, wielding Shockwave in gun mode to take out Ratchet, and using his shoulder cannon to severely damage Jazz and Cliffjumper. When Elita 1 emerged from the space bridge portal through which Shockwave had come, Soundwave ordered the Decepticons to give chase after she blasted it with Prime's Ion Blaster and urged the Autobot leader to retreat. However, Shockwave convinced Soundwave that repairing the bridge was of much greater importance to them. Meanwhile, Astrotrain, whom Soundwave had ordered to capture Spike Witwicky, informed the human that Soundwave was aware of Shockwave's interest in studying this new species. Back at the Nemesis, Soundwave, in the middle of attempting to repair Ravage, was interrupted by Shockwave, who scoffed at the idea of prioritizing such an unimportant task when a new era was upon them. However, just as Shockwave moved to throw the record icon into a recycler, the two were distracted by a huge whale. Soundwave commented that the planet had many organic wonders, to which Shockwave replied that it was wonderful to know the role the creature would play in their cause. Walking over to an energy feeder the Constructions had just finished building, Soundwave watched as the whale and other nearby sea life were sucked into the machine and converted into energon. Accompanying Shockwave to the interrogation of a captured Jazz and Cliffjumper, Soundwave led Thundercracker, who disapproved of Shockwave's dishonorable brutality, from the room, saying that it was best not to dwell on such things, and that as much as they disliked Shockwave, his role was key to their plans. Though the Seeker proceeded to make clear his frustration at leaving Skywarp behind at the Ark, Soundwave refuted that his rescue was out of the question, and that, as a deception, Thundercracker's life belonged to him. Soundwave was among the Decepticons who witnessed the reactivation of the space bridge, which opened a portal above Earth from which Cybertron emerged. As Shockwave prepared to return to the planet, Soundwave pleaded with him to retrieve parts to repair Ravage, but Shockwave shut down the idea yet again. After Shockwave had returned from Cybertron, the Autobots invaded the Nemesis in the hopes of rescuing their captured comrades. Soundwave watched as Shockwave ordered the Constructicons to merge into Devastator and halt their attack. As things began to look bad for the Autobots, a strange portal opened up and Ultra Magnus and Wheeljack stepped through. However, Magnus froze up, unable to bring himself to fight, and fled the battle. Shockwave transformed to gun mode, but before Soundwave could use him to execute Cliffjumper, Carly's van came zooming out of the portal and rammed into him, causing him to drop the weapon. Meanwhile, Devastator toppled onto the energy feeder, destroying it and causing Shockwave to retreat through the space bridge to obtain reinforcements. However, it was not Shockwave that would eventually re-emerge from the bridge, but a massive chunk of Cybertron itself, which fell into the ocean, scattering the remaining Decepticons and causing them to lose the Nemesis. When they eventually regrouped, Soundwave deemed Cybertron as a lost cause and refocused efforts on holding their ground on Earth. Hoping to gather a stockpile of energy and draw the Autobots out of hiding, the Decepticons commenced numerous raids on cities, ransacking them and slaughtering humans. Just as Soundwave had predicted, Optimus, and what remained of the Autobots did eventually arrive in an attempt to aid the humans. However, he opted not to attack, and to instead keep an eye on their numbers. Promising Laserbeak that Ravage would eventually be repaired, Soundwave sent him on a mission that he mused he should have done the moment he had awoke aboard the Ark. Soundwave and the Decepticons eventually tracked the Autobots to their energy feeder at a dam. However, they were not the only insects there, as Starscream, still bearing the scars from his fight with Soundwave, was there along with Astrotrain and the Combaticons. Declaring that Soundwave would pay for his treachery, Starscream ordered the Combaticons to merge into Bruticus. As the Constructicons formed Devastator in retaliation, Soundwave charged Starscream, only to be rammed into the water by a vengeful Astrotrain. Soundwave castigated the Triple Changer for switching sides so easily, only for Starscream to fall on top of Astrotrain. Soundwave then asked Thundercracker for help against the two, but Thundercracker, having just learned of Soundwave's role in Skywarp's fate, transformed and deserted Soundwave instead. Not long after, Optimus Prime used Megatron's fusion cannon to shoot a hole in the dam, and the brawling Decepticons were caught up in a flash flood. The battle moved into Seattle, as Devastator and Bruticus continued to brawl, with the Autobots milling around to try and save any humans caught in the crossfire. As Starscream soared above an Astrotrain, Soundwave ejected the one-armed Rumble, who shattered the Triple Changer's right wing and sent him crashing to the ground. Though Bruticus attempted to come to the aid of his master, Soundwave ordered Devastator to tackle him back down. Fighting Starscream once more, Soundwave berated the Seeker for how pathetic he truly was, pointing out his need for Earth technology to even move. Furious, Starscream tore off Soundwave's chest door and extracted the comatose Ravage, preparing to finish what Prime had started. However, much to Starscream's horror, a heavily battered Megatron arrived and put an end to tussle with only a single word. Commending Soundwave and his tapes for their loyalty, Megatron revived Ravage, much to Soundwave's delight, and declared that they had much work to do.